If you're listening and carry your own grief, we want to say you're not alone.
In my experience, grief doesn't just teach. It invites it's a reorientation, a recalibration of your whole nervous system. When we slow down to be with the experience and we honor the experience and the impact, there's something magical that happens right there.
When that wave comes, it can be disorienting. And because it is a powerful emotion, that emotion of grief. And grief isn't something to get over and get on to the next thing. It's something to integrate and become part of our wholeness. Welcome back to the Healing You Method podcast. I'm Gail Donohue, and I'm here with my dear friend and co-host, Gloria Lybecker.
Hi, thank you for joining us. Today's episode, it's especially close to our hearts. We're entering that tender terrain of grief and how it shapes us and breaks us open, and ultimately, when we let it, how it can transform us.
We've titled this episode, Grief as a Teacher, Loss as Luminary, because that's what it's been for us, for Gloria and I. If you're listening and carry your own grief, we want to say you're not alone.
Yeah, I invite you to take a moment with us right now and feel your feet on the ground. Soften your jaw. Breathe. You're welcome here exactly as you are.
Just taking a breath with that. Thank you, Gloria.
Yeah.
And you and I have both been through significant loss. And in doing that, it's changed the way we walk through the world. And
Mm-hmm.
could you share with us what stands out for you when you reflect on how grief has shaped your path?
Yeah, it's really been so profound, particularly losing my granddaughter Sierra and then later my grandson Isaac. It shook everything I thought I knew. And there was definitely a silence that followed. And in that, I began to hear the deeper calling of my own soul. So grief really cracked open a doorway to do the work I do now in a profoundly different way, holding space for others in their own healing and continuing to deepen my own practice.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. And, for me, grief slowed me down. With working with grief, it's invited me into stillness that I
Yeah.
didn't know that I needed. And the loss of someone dear to me also changed how I listened to myself, to clients, and to life itself. It certainly softened me in ways that leadership books never could.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, in my experience, grief doesn't just teach. It invites it's a orientation, a recalibration of your whole nervous system. And to me, I really was caught with looking at what really matters the most in my life and getting really clear about that.
Mm. Yeah, there's this idea in our culture that we're supposed to, just move on after loss. I remember my first experience with death when I was younger, and I sort of had this feeling like that I couldn't be happy anymore, because if I was happy, that would demonstrate that didn't care enough, or how could I be happy when this person had just been lost? So it's part of that, overlaying impetus to like just move on, just move on. But that's not something that resonates with me.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's a life is a spiritual journey. And what I've come to realize is it's so important to meet people where they are. There's many of us that haven't really developed our spiritual path. And when I know for myself, when I was living my life focused on what the world reflected back to me, it
Mhm.
was a completely different landscape. And so, for our listeners, if you're living in a world where it's the world reflecting everything back to you, it's important to take time to be with that. And then to maybe get curious and wonder and see what else is possible. When I began to meet my spiritual mentors, it drastically changed my life.
Mm.
And for me, when Sierra and Isaac left, I found my favorite picture and I had it made into a big canvas and put it above my desk, and they're always there, and my beautiful horse Saphira as well. And they're just representations for me in the constellation of my life because the energies of those lives are still connected to mine. And so they're always available to me to connect with and to commune with. And so those relationships, they don't end. They really live on and impact the way that I show up, even in this podcast.
Mm.
So the bond's always there.
Yeah, the bond's always there, and it's not about doing something in this one way that
Yeah.
society expects us to do it. It's and what I'm hearing from you, that it was like weaving your relationship into a new form.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that that in itself right there is post-traumatic growth? When
Mm-hmm.
we slow down to be with the experience and we honor the experience and the impact, there's something magical that happens right there. And it's going to be unique for each being. And yet, so that's it's not about like we had referred earlier, people say, oh, just, you need to move on. It's time
Mm-hmm.
to move on. It's like, oh, it's not in the forgetting. It's there's a transmutation that happens. So if we take a moment right here and pause and we just ask, and for our listeners to just really sit with this, what does it mean to honor both sorrow and gratitude? And
Mm.
how can we allow grief to shape us without letting it define us? I found that to be those questions to be so powerful in my own life and in my own grief process. Grief, it doesn't wait for just private moments. Sometimes it comes up in the middle of the grocery store, or I'm in the middle of a meeting, or it's mid-sentence. And I I personally I allow it, I allow it. How about you, Gail?
Yeah, it's true. Like when that wave comes, it can be disorienting.
Yeah.
And because it is a powerful emotion, that emotion of grief. And if we can meet it with some gentleness, that makes all the difference. So let's offer our listeners something simple they can do when that moment hits.
Yeah.
And if you want to join me in just placing one hand on your heart and one on your belly and just thinking about, softening your gaze, or you could gently close your eyes and just take a longer inhale and then even a longer exhale through your mouth. And maybe you make a sound as you exhale or a sigh, and just noticing what might be happening in your body and perhaps even noticing the air coming through your nostrils and into your throat and into your lungs and belly, and allowing yourself just to have this moment to pause and feeling your feet and grounding into the now, and just so much giving yourself permission that you're allowed to pause, like totally pause and be with yourself and feel what's happening.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, Gail. That is so incredibly powerful to pause with presence. What would you say to someone um, if they feel like they're doing grief wrong?
Well, oh yeah. Well, there's not one way to grieve. And there's certainly not a right way to grieve and a wrong way to grieve.
Mm,
And like there's a lot of um, well, I guess you could say no. Like I don't necessarily like to use that word no, but there's no timeline and there's no grade to learn and there's no performance expectation. If you're feeling, you're grieving, and that's we want to recognize that as sacred and
yeah,
not have any expectations upon any of the grieving process.
yeah. Well, yeah, I resonate with that so strongly. The grief, in my experience, just is it's the part of the continuum of love. And
Mm,
so when you recognize just how deeply you grieve, it's a recognition of just how deeply you love
mm.
as well. And that is very sacred. And also the importance of accompaniment. We're not intended to be alone. We were created for relationship, in my experience. And if it's not through community or rituals, going out and being with my herd, being with your animals, being in nature, healing, in my experience, it happens when you're in relationship with life.
Yeah, relationship with life with others. It's so important that it's through connection and accompaniment with others that grief becomes integrated. We're not meant to grieve alone, just like we're not meant to be alone. And grief isn't something to get over and get on to the next thing. It's
No.
something to integrate and become part of our wholeness. So, Gloria, in looking and talking today, what's one way grief has made you more luminous?
I like that word. Um, well, for me, what it did is it gave me the experience of being fully present in life and in being present with life and knowing, recognizing what matters the most to me, gave me back my voice to speak up, to be heard, to get outside of the box of my comfort zone and be authentically me. And I can't get that wrong.
Mm.
How about you, Gail?
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. You can't get me wrong. You can't get me, you wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm very, very grateful about the way grief deepened my connection with myself and also my capacity for compassion. And it really illuminated my humanity and
Mm,
and illuminated myself as a human and not as what this society had imprinted on me of how I should be.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's been,
that's
a big
a
growth.
big one. It's a really big growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, if you are in grief, we want to be accompanying you. Your sorrow is so sacred, and your healing matters. You matter. And there is accompaniment available. I invite you to reach out and see where you're willing to allow yourself to be accompanied. Our next episode is going to be exploring unhooking from high functioning anxiety, which, in my experience, that can come from our grief experience as well. All those different circuits of emotion and motivation, sometimes they kind of like a train wreck of entanglement.
Yeah. And we'll look at how perfectionism and people pleasing can mask that deeper dysregulation and what you can do to start untangling from that cycle.
Yeah, one of the questions I get asked, Gail, is how do you notice when a client's success is driven by adrenaline?
Yes. And then also for myself, like clients wanting to know like what can they do to shift from urgency into being grounded and taking action and building that momentum towards the future they want.
Mm.
So together we'll explore boundaries with tech, with time and self, so you can reclaim your nervous system's peace.
Yeah. So until then, take good care of your heart and remember that healing happens in relationships.